There are nights when you lie awake and feel something inside you quietly collapsing. Not loudly, not dramatically, just slipping, like a part of you is fading into a version of yourself you no longer recognize. You stare at the ceiling in the dark, wondering when the spark left you, when the things you used to care about stopped feeling meaningful, when your life, once so full of noise and direction, became a place you barely feel present in. You tell yourself you should be grateful. You have a job. You have responsibilities. You have people who care, but deep inside, beneath all the logic and all the shoulds, you feel that something is breaking open, and you don't know how to stop it. This is the part no one talks about. The moment when motivation disappears, when your routines feel hollow, when your dreams feel foreign, when even your own reflection looks like someone you used to be. You try to push through, try to stay busy, try to pretend you're okay. But pretending becomes exhausting, and the silence inside you grows louder than anything outside of you. This is the dark night of the soul, a place every human enters at least once, and most run from their entire lives. It's not the darkness that scares you. It's the emptiness, the numbness, the terrifying sense that nothing you do seems to matter the way it once did. That who you were is slipping away, but who you're becoming hasn't arrived yet. It feels like loss. It feels like death. But not of your life, of your identity. Your mind panics. Something is wrong with me. Why can't I feel anything? Why is everything slowing down? Why does the world feel so far away? But the soul speaks in a different language. It whispers, quiet and steady. Let go. Something old is dying so something true can rise. And this is the hardest part, because no one warns you that transformation doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with disorientation, with unraveling, with losing your grip on the version of yourself you've outgrown. It begins in the dark. Think about the moments you've kept hidden from everyone. The mornings you didn't want to get out of bed. The afternoons you felt like your chest was hollow. The nights you cried quietly because you didn't know how to explain what was happening inside you. The moments when you felt disconnected from your own life, as if you were watching it through a window, unable to step back in. These aren't failures. These are thresholds. Because there is a silence the universe uses when it's preparing you for something your mind isn't ready to understand. A silence so deep, so absolute, it forces you to face everything you've avoided. Your wounds, your exhaustion, your unmet needs, your truth. And when the noise dies, when the distractions fall away, when all that's left is you and the ache inside your ribs, that is when the field begins its work. Not when you're strong, not when you're confident, not when you're manifesting perfectly, but when your defenses finally fall and you surrender to the stillness that terrifies you. Because the dark night of the soul is not punishment. It is purification. It is the stripping away of what is false. It is the clearing of space for a timeline you are not yet able to see. This emptiness you feel, it is not a void, it is a womb. A sacred place where your old identity dissolves so a truer self can emerge. In this video, you're going to understand what this darkness really is, why your life feels paused, why your passion feels dead, and why this silence is not the end of the road, but the beginning. Because you're not losing yourself. You're shedding yourself. And the version of you that's coming is the one you were always meant to meet. So stay with this moment. Stay with the darkness. Stay with the unraveling. The soul does its greatest work when the mind has nothing left to hold on to. If all of this feels familiar, you're not alone. Many people have walked through this quiet collapse before stepping into a life they didn't know was waiting. One of them was a man named Evan Miller, a man whose dark night led him somewhere he never imagined. Evan Miller never planned to fall apart. He was the kind of person people relied on, the one who always stayed late, always said yes, always carried more than he should. On the surface, he looked steady, but inside, a quiet exhaustion had been growing for years, tightening around his chest like an invisible fist. It finally broke on a cold February morning in Seattle. He was standing in his kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, when his hand suddenly began to shake. The cup slipped, shattering across the floor. His breath shortened, his vision narrowed. His heart raced so violently he thought it was failing. Minutes later, he found himself in the back of an ambulance, staring at the ceiling lights rushing above him. The nurse held his wrist gently and said, "Your heart is fine. This is panic." But Evan didn't feel fine. Something inside him had fractured something he didn't know how to put back together. The next day, he tried to return to work, as if pretending could make it go away. But when he opened his laptop, the code blurred, the room warped, and voices around him sounded distant, as if he were hearing them from underwater. In the middle of a meeting, he stood up abruptly, walked out, and sat in his car for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel just to remember he was still here. He told HR he needed time off. He didn't say that he felt like he was disappearing from his own life. The days that followed weren't restful. They were hollow. He wandered his apartment like a ghost, trying to read, trying to run, trying to meditate, trying to be the person he used to be. But nothing landed. Nothing reached him. The silence inside his chest grew heavier, more suffocating. He wasn't working. He wasn't healing. He was unraveling. One late afternoon, with rain smearing across the windshield and the sky the color of cold steel, Evan drove without direction. The city felt blurred, damp, unreal. He didn't know where he was going until he was already there. Green Lake, a place he had forgotten about for years. He stepped out of the car and felt the rain hit his face, sharp and grounding, as if reality was trying to pull him back. He sat on a weathered wooden bench by the water. For the first time, he didn't try to fix himself. He didn't force clarity. He didn't pretend. He just sat, broken and breathing, while the world around him softened into a quiet he had avoided his entire life. And in that quiet, something subtle shifted. Not a revelation, not a message, just a small, almost imperceptible loosening inside his chest, like a door cracking open in a dark room. Evan returned to the lake the next day, and the day after, each time. He carried less resistance and more surrender. The stillness no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a place he needed to enter, even if it scared him. 3 weeks passed, and during one of those silent afternoons, he realized something. He wasn't broken. He was between selves. The old version of him, the overachiever, the perfectionist, the man powered by fear and expectation, had begun to dissolve. And the new version hadn't arrived yet. He was standing in the space between timelines, in the uncomfortable but sacred emptiness where identity reshapes itself. Then came the day everything shifted. It was week 5. Evan ducked into a small cafe to escape the rain. While waiting for his drink, his eyes caught a piece of paper pinned to a corkboard human-centered design weekend workshop. He didn't know why, but something inside him surged awake. Before he could think, a quiet but unmistakable voice rose in his chest. Go. This is the direction. He signed up. He attended. And within hours, he felt something he hadn't felt in months: aliveness, intuition, creative spark. It was as if a forgotten part of him had been waiting behind that door all along. Over the next weeks, design became a language he understood without trying. It didn't demand anything from him. It invited him. It made sense in a way his old life no longer did. 6 months later, Evan was hired by a health tech startup, where he combined his engineering background with human-centered design. The work was lighter, deeper, truer. He no longer felt the need to prove himself. He no longer forced his life into shapes that didn't fit. Instead of chasing outcomes, he followed resonance, and life, almost effortlessly, began opening in front of him. One evening, Evan returned to Green Lake. But this time, the water wasn't a mirror of his collapse. It was a mirror of his becoming. He understood, finally, that the months he thought he was falling apart were the months he was being rebuilt. Quietly, invisibly, precisely. The dark night hadn't destroyed him. It had rerouted him. It had cleaned the space where the next version of himself could finally breathe. And for the first time in years, Evan felt not lost, but guided by a field that had been speaking to him all along, waiting for him to become still enough to hear it. What happened to Evan wasn't random. It wasn't weakness. And it wasn't just stress. It was something far more ancient, far more intelligent, something built into the human system itself. Because when the soul begins to shift, the body and brain follow, even if the mind has no understanding of what's happening. Modern neuroscience calls this period a reorganization phase, a neurological shedding. When everything familiar stops working, not because you're failing, but because your brain is rewiring itself for a new identity. In Evan's case, the collapse wasn't the end of his functionality. It was the end of an outdated map. His mind could no longer sustain a version of him that his soul had already outgrown. There is a network in the brain called the default mode network, the DMN. It activates not when you're focused or productive, but when you're resting, daydreaming, drifting, or sitting quietly by a lake with nothing left to prove. It is the part of you that processes old memories, dissolves outdated patterns, and shapes the beginnings of a future self. And here is the paradox: the DMN becomes most active in the moments you feel least productive, least inspired, least yourself. In the moments your ego calls failure, your brain is actually preparing space for a new blueprint. This is why Evan felt like he was falling apart. His mind wasn't shutting down, it was rearranging the architecture of who he could become. But neuroscience is only half the picture, because the deeper mechanism of transformation doesn't happen solely in the brain. It happens in the field, the quantum field that surrounds and includes everything you are. Every emotion you feel, every thought you hold, every belief you repeat emits a frequency, not metaphorically, literally. The heart generates an electromagnetic field measurable several feet outside the body. The brain radiates patterns of coherent or chaotic waves. Your nervous system broadcasts your state into the environment, constantly interacting with a larger field of information. When you are anxious, forcing, striving, grasping, the field around you becomes noisy, unstable, hard for new possibilities to latch onto. But when you enter stillness, even the uncomfortable kind, even the dark kind, your frequency begins to settle, like a pond no longer disturbed by wind. Clarity emerges only when the surface becomes still enough to reflect what's always been there. This is why Evan's life didn't shift when he tried to fix himself. It shifted when he stopped interfering, when he stopped running, when he stopped forcing outcomes and dropped into stillness so deep it scared him. In that stillness, his field became coherent again, aligned, readable, responsive. Quantum mechanics calls this superposition the state where all potentials exist at once. Before a new timeline collapses into form, it exists as pure possibility, like a vibration waiting for the right tuning fork. And you, in your stillest moments, are the tuning fork. This is why the dark night often precedes a breakthrough. The collapse of old neural pathways lowers internal noise. Emotional exhaustion forces surrender. The ego loses its grip. And the field feels you clearly for the first time in years. In that clarity, your reality begins to reorganize, not from effort, but from resonance. Evan didn't find the poster for that workshop by accident. His internal field had shifted. His attention, once fragmented, had become receptive. What looked like coincidence was actually coherence, a moment when the outer world rearranged to meet the frequency he had begun to embody. Science calls it pattern recognition. Spirituality calls it synchronicity. The quantum field calls it alignment. But the experience is the same. The world responds differently when you do. And this is the truth most people never learn. You don't create your next chapter by pushing harder. You create it by becoming a signal clear enough for the chapter to find you. The brain opens the door. The heart tunes the frequency. The field carries the message. Stillness is the moment they all agree. Evan's story wasn't about luck or coincidence. It was a demonstration of what happens when a human being becomes quiet enough, honest enough, and surrendered enough to let the deeper intelligence of the universe reorganize them. And now, the question becomes, how do you enter this state intentionally? How do you step into stillness, not as avoidance, but as alignment? How do you allow neutrality, this powerful, underestimated frequency, to rebuild your life from the inside out? That's what we'll unravel next. Understanding the stillness is one thing, but learning how to enter it, how to live inside it without fear, without rushing to escape, without filling the silence with noise, that is where transformation becomes real. You don't need a complicated ritual. You don't need crystals or perfect posture or a room full of candles. What you need is presence. What you need is willingness. What you need is a moment where you stop trying to shape reality and allow reality to reshape you. Let's start with the brain. During periods of overload and constant stimulation, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making, clarity, and higher reasoning becomes flooded with stress signals. Meanwhile, the default mode network, the DMN, which handles integration, reflection, and identity restructuring, struggles to activate. This is why you feel fragmented when you're overwhelmed. Your brain is not broken, it's simply stuck in survival mode, unable to access the networks that help you evolve. Stillness changes that. When you pause, truly pause, the amygdala quiets, cortisol lowers, and the DMN becomes active again. This is the neurological doorway into self-reorganization. And it doesn't require intense meditation or spiritual discipline. It requires space. It requires the absence of force. It requires moments where your mind is not being pulled into problem-solving or performance. The same is true with your brain waves. In high stress or constant doing, your brain is locked in beta fast, narrow, survival-oriented. But when you enter intentional stillness, your brain naturally shifts into alpha and, at times, theta. Alpha is where creativity, intuition, and pattern recognition emerge. Theta is where deep emotional processing and subconscious rewiring occur. In these slower states, the brain becomes more plastic, more capable of letting go of old neural loops and forming new ones. This is why stillness feels strange or uncomfortable at first. Your system is transitioning from beta's noise to alpha's openness, and the mind resists that drop because it's unfamiliar. But if you can sit through that threshold, even for a few minutes, you give your neural networks the space they need to reorganize your inner world. Now the heart. The heart operates electrically, generating an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond the body. When your emotions are chaotic, fear, urgency, pushing this field becomes jagged and incoherent. The brain receives that signal and mirrors the chaos. But when you slow your breath and soften your focus, the heart rhythm stabilizes into what scientists call HRV, coherent smooth, rhythmic waves. This coherence signals the brain to shift out of survival, which in turn supports the transition into alpha and theta states. In other words, calm in the heart produces clarity in the mind. The field responds to this coherence, not metaphorically, literally. A coherent system radiates a more stable electromagnetic signature, allowing your nervous system to tune to deeper states of awareness. This is why people often report synchronicities, insights, breakthroughs, and inner guidance emerging only after they enter sustained stillness. Their physiology stops broadcasting noise, and the field finally has something steady to respond to. So how do you practice this? How do you train coherence instead of waiting for it? Find a quiet place. Not special, just uninterrupted. Sit with your spine relaxed, but present. Let your breath fall into a natural rhythm, and place a soft awareness in the center of your chest. This is not mystical. It is anatomical. Directing attention to the heart slows the amygdala and shifts the autonomic nervous system toward parasympathetic dominance, your rest, repair, and insight state. As you breathe, imagine your inhale lengthening just slightly and your exhale loosening your internal grip. This balanced, unforced rhythm begins synchronizing your heart and brain. Within seconds, your heart rate variability improves. Within minutes, your prefrontal cortex lights back up. If you remain here long enough, your brainwaves begin transitioning beta, giving way to alpha, and brief openings of theta where deeper clarity and emotional resolution can finally emerge. As you settle, you may notice an immediate discomfort, the need to move, to fix something, to reach for your phone, to make this moment more interesting, more productive, more useful. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It is the doorway. It is the noise your mind makes when it realizes it can no longer distract you from yourself. Instead of resisting it, observe it. Watch the thoughts rise like smoke. Watch the emotions tighten like knots. Watch the body want to escape the very stillness it desperately needs. You are not here to stop the mind. You are here to stop obeying it. This is the beginning of neutrality, when you shift from reacting to simply witnessing. Now, imagine that your awareness drops from your head into your chest. Not in a mystical way, just in a human way. Like you're taking the spotlight away from your racing thoughts and shining it onto the quiet intelligence of your heart. Feel the difference. The mind analyzes. The heart listens. The mind grasps. The heart receives. And from your chest, let your awareness soften even further down into your body, into your arms, your legs, your belly, your back. Feel the weight of yourself. Feel the aliveness just beneath your skin. This aliveness is not thought. It is not emotion. It is presence, your pure existence before the noise. Now, expand that presence outward, just a little. Feel the space around your body, the air resting against your skin, the subtle hum of existence that surrounds you. This is not imagination. This is your field. This is the electromagnetic signature your heart produces, expanding and stabilizing as you become more coherent. Stay here. Let the silence become not something you endure, but something you inhabit. Let boredom rise if it wants to. Let discomfort whisper. Let fear surface. None of it can harm you. These are just the fragments of your old identity losing their grip. You do not push them away. You do not chase them. You simply let them pass. This is the essence of the practice intentional non-reaction, the art of becoming a clean signal in a world full of static. And when you feel ready, whether it's after 5 minutes or 20, anchor the moment with a quiet, truthful statement. Something simple your nervous system can hold. Something that tells your field you're available. Whisper, I am open. I am listening. I am available to the stillness where all things begin. You don't need to believe the words immediately. Just speak them. Your field will do the rest. This practice is not meant to make you feel better instantly. It is meant to make you available. Available to guidance. Available to clarity. Available to the timeline that's been trying to reach you. Because neutrality is not emptiness. Neutrality is readiness. And when you learn to enter this state, when you learn to sit with the silence long enough for your frequency to settle, you stop chasing the life you want, and you start receiving it. By now, you understand something most people spend their entire lives running from. The stillness isn't empty. The boredom isn't meaningless. The silence isn't a void. These moments you've been taught to fear are not signs that your life is falling apart. They are signs that your life is rearranging itself beneath the surface, preparing to rise in a form you can't yet see. This quiet place you've been resisting, this numbness, this pause in direction, is not stagnation. It is pre-creation. Every major transformation in nature begins this way. The seed splits in darkness before it ever touches light. The tide pulls back before a wave reaches its full power. The forest burns so the soil can breathe again. And the self, the you that exists beyond fear and expectation, emerges in exactly the same way through the dismantling of what no longer fits. Evan didn't rise because he forced himself out of the darkness. He rose because he stopped fighting it. He became still enough for the next version of himself to find him. And the same intelligence that guided him is guiding you now. You don't need to rush. You don't need to force clarity. You don't need to build your new life with trembling hands. Your only job is to become available to soften, to breathe, to trust that the silence holds more than the noise ever did. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not losing your spark. You are standing in the threshold of a reality that has been waiting for you to stop running long enough to enter it. So tonight, or tomorrow morning, or the next time the world feels too loud and your mind feels too tired, give yourself 5 minutes. 5 minutes where you don't try to fix anything, where you don't chase inspiration, where you don't demand answers. Sit with yourself. Let the stillness rise. Let the mind unclench. Let the ego loosen its grip. Let your field reorganize without your interference. Because the truth is simple. Stillness is not the opposite of creation. Stillness is the frequency creation responds to. You don't manifest a new timeline through force. You collapse into it by becoming coherent with it. And you don't step into your future by fighting the present. You step into it by listening quietly, steadily, bravely to the space inside you that is trying to lead the way. If this message resonates, if something in you softens at these words, if you feel even the smallest shift, like a window opening somewhere deep within you, then you're already in motion. You're already unraveling the old patterns. You're already aligning with the version of yourself you're here to become. Not through effort, not through struggle, but through presence. Before this video ends, speak a quiet promise to yourself, not of productivity or speed, but of devotion to your own becoming. Whisper, I will not run from the silence anymore. Let it settle in your chest. Let it feel true, even if only for a moment. That moment is enough to begin. Your next timeline isn't waiting for more action. It's waiting for a more coherent you. And the stillness, the one you feared, avoided, resisted, has been calling you into that coherence all along. So step into it. Not with urgency, not with force, but with the calm, quiet knowing that your future is already unfolding. And all you have to do now is let it in.